Action!
Action! Hi, Frank. We talked about the three formative figures of Western philosophy. Socrates, we talked about how he came to be. We talked about his protege, Plato, and we alluded slightly to the protege of Plato named Aristotle. So let's examine Aristotle just a little more deeply. We have spoken about him before, but let's bring it all together. Socrates and Plato, we discussed, were alarmed by a new technology on the planet called rhetoric. They felt it was dangerous, it was irresponsible, and it was proliferating and getting into the hands of anybody, and it was terrifying. And they felt that reason itself had left us, and they were worried about dialogue and discourse, so they formed a body of philosophy. Aristotle would come along and really try to engineer this, and what Aristotle puts together is the Aristotelian rules of rhetoric. He actually wrote the rules on how rhetorical discourse should go. Today, the court system in the West adopts the bulk of Aristotelian rules of rhetoric. Aristotle also tries to get his hands on and tries to create a structure of formal logic. The Babylonians have tinkered with it, but Aristotle's really the first. And in a nutshell, and I'm not logician guy, but logic is simply the science of valid inferences, of valid conclusions. And the anatomy of logic is simple. The backbone of logic is something called the argument. And the argument's anatomy is you have assumptions, which are not examined, and they form sort of a basis. Then you go premise, 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 conclusion. And the sciences, are these conclusions valid based on these premises? That's an argument, that's logic. There's two types of logical argument in general. There's deductive and inductive. Deductive is going from the general to the particular. Lawyers use deductive reasoning, so do detectives. Inductive reasoning is going from the particular to the general, like the scientific method, for example. So really quickly, deductive reasoning might be all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, Socrates is mortal. There's nothing really new that's being added to the conversation. It's merely a rearrangement of some of the premises, and the formality looks valid. Induction is green frog, green frog, green frog, all frogs are green. It's trying to induce to a new piece of knowledge that doesn't exist within the pre-existing construct. It can be dangerous, and it's really how the scientific method works. Theories come from hypotheses and experiments, statistical testing. A couple of other things about Aristotle. He takes logic, and really his contribution is to examine or get his hands around what is called the syllogism. A syllogism is kind of like a haiku. It's 3 lines, and we just felt a whisper of it a moment ago. A syllogism takes 4 possible expressions of a relationship. So think, for example, all cows eat grass. That's 1. No cows eat grass. That's 2. Some cows eat grass. That's 3. Some cows do not eat grass. Hopefully you're drawing circles with a pen and paper right now. So that would be line 1 of those 4 would be line 1 in the haiku. So all cows eat grass. Elsie is a cow. Elsie eats grass. What these 3 lines suggest, according to Aristotle, is a possibility to take 256 different permutations of how to arrange a different introduction of a different actor within one of those constructs. And he supposes that depending on which historical account you go with, only 19 of those are valid. So back to this dangerous rhetoric, this technology that was causing alarm in Plato and Socrates. Aristotle says, well, we need some rules. We need to get organized. We need to not be divorced from reason. We need some rules of logic. And he gives us the syllogism. The Stoics would come later and add more logical constructs like and, or, not, nor statements, which we could talk about another time, if-then statements. These would be the basis of computer logic, Boolean logic, which takes us into the basis of blockchain. One more thing about Aristotle. We only know 10% of his works. The other 90% have been lost to history. We talked about that. And it would be dangerous to extrapolate a characterization of Aristotle's perspectives based on only the 10% that we do know. But the 10% we do know, Aristotle takes a very opposite position to his mentor Plato. Example, Plato, as suggested by his allegory of the shadows in the cave, looks at reality, looks at metaphysics, what is real, and pretty much suggests that reality is not limited to that which we experience only through our five senses: seeing, touching, tasting, feeling, smelling, so forth. Aristotle takes the diametrically opposing view and says, let's contemplate that reality is limited to that which we experience through our five senses. The name of Aristotle's philosophy is called empiricism, and the name of Plato's philosophy is called, depending on which book you're reading, rationalism or idealism. Plato's more about the world of ideas, and Aristotle's more about the world of real things that we experience through our senses, real in quotes. Just about every philosopher who would come along later would take one of these two positions, and most of philosophy will fall squarely within one of these two camps. I think that's it for Aristotle. Oh, a couple more things. Socrates, the adjective is Socratic. Plato, the adjective is Platonic. And Aristotle, the adjective is Aristotelian. So Socratic means careful examination by asking tough questions and trying to get underneath the proposition. Platonic has a lot of different interpretations, but certainly it means friendly. And Aristotelian is rigorous rules of rhetoric. Okay, friend, I'm going to go now. Thank you to my gorgeous wife, who teaches me wonderful things every day, who teaches me to unlearn, to learn, to relearn. Thank you to our feline Desmond, who teaches the planet and the universe how to be. And Mark Yowitz, we miss you. Bye,